It had been nearly 20 years since I last stood on the porch of my grandfather's old cabin by Pine Ridge Lake. The wooden boards still creaked underfoot the same way they had in my childhood, and the scent of pine hung in the air like a memory that had never faded. I'd come back with the intention of restoring the cabin, 5 acres of quiet land that had been in my family since 1947. I expected solitude. What I got was anything but. The first warning sign didn't come from the trees or the water. It came in the form of piercing sirens that shattered the stillness like broken glass. I stepped outside to find 2 police cruisers pulling up to the edge of the gravel road. My hands lifted instinctively, palms open, as the officers approached slowly. From beside the cruisers emerged a woman in a sharply tailored navy blazer, her hair a stiff, sculpted helmet. She pointed straight at me, voice shrill enough to make the dogs in the distance howl. "That's him," she screeched. "He's trespassing." I told him to leave. He refused. I kept my face neutral, took a breath, and spoke calmly. "Officers, I'm standing on land that's been in my family for generations. I have the deed on me, if you'll let me reach for it." The officer leading the pair gave a cautious nod. I pulled the paper from my back pocket. The edges were soft with age, the ink faded, but every word was authentic. What the woman didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in 6 minutes her little HOA empire was going to crumble. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is David Hartley. I spent a dozen years overseas as a real estate attorney specializing in property law and trust disputes. This cabin was where I learned to fish with my grandfather, where I heard my first ghost stories, and where I swore I'd return one day. The cabin had aged in my absence. Ivy wrapped around the siding like it owned the place, and the dock looked ready to fall into the lake. But the land, our land, was still there, untouched at its core. What I hadn't realized was that while I was gone, a homeowners association had crept in like invasive vine, wrapping its rules around every tree and fence post around the lake. Trouble started almost immediately. I was on the porch, clearing fallen limbs from the steps, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A golf cart pulled up, driven by a woman who looked like she hadn't smiled since the Clinton administration. Her blazer was ironed sharp enough to cut glass, and a gold badge gleamed on her chest. "Excuse me," she barked, her tone more command than greeting. "What do you think you're doing?" I stood, brushed off some pine needles. "Just cleaning up my place. Can I help you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Your place? This cabin sits on HOA-managed land. I didn't authorize any work permits." I tilted my head. "Work permits? I'm clearing dead branches. This land has belonged to my family since the 40s. She practically hissed at me. "Don't get smart. I'm Patricia Peton, president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. Nothing happens here without going through me." I kept my tone polite. "Patricia, I'm David Hartley. My grandfather built this cabin. I have the original deed. This land predates your association by decades." She flushed an angry shade of red. "Impossible. We control all lakefront properties. We've been maintaining them for years." I gestured toward the overgrown yard and sagging dock. "Your version of maintenance needs work." She shoved a clipboard at me like she was issuing a citation. "You're in violation of multiple bylaws: unregistered occupancy, unauthorized property alterations, failure to comply with the architectural review process." I held up my hand. "Let's slow down. My property existed long before your HOA. I've got everything you need: deed, trust documents, survey maps." She gave a bitter little laugh. "Oh, you're one of those. Think a piece of paper trumps our authority? Well, your little document means nothing. The HOA was established in 2013 and has complete jurisdiction here." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of the 1947 deed. "Unless your HOA came equipped with a time machine, I think you're mistaken." Her face contorted in fury. "This is fraud. You're forging documents. You're a squatter." She stormed back to her cart, barking into her phone as she drove off. Soon, neighbors started peeking through their blinds. Dogs barked. Whispers rippled through the woods like wind. I went back to work, pretending not to notice. But I knew this wasn't over. 20 minutes later, Patricia returned with backup. 3 more board members, all dressed like carbon copies of her. She stood at the front like a commander preparing for battle. "Mr. Hartley," she announced coldly, "we've held an emergency session. You have 5 minutes to leave the premises or—" They said they were calling the police. I leaned casually against the porch rail, unmoved. "I already showed you the deed," I reminded her. "If you don't believe me, the county records office is open till 5. Her eyes narrowed. "I don't need records. I know this HOA inside and out. You're a trespasser and a threat." One of the board members, a balding man named Harold, shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should double-check the records." She whirled on him. "Harold, he's smirking. He could be dangerous." I wasn't smirking, not yet, but the whole thing felt absurd. There I was, wearing a plain polo shirt, being painted as some rogue vigilante. "Patricia," I said evenly, "I'm going inside to make coffee. Call whoever you want." "I'm not going anywhere," she snapped, pulled out her phone. 911? "Yes, I need help. There's a dangerous man who broke into private property and refuses to leave." I exhaled and stepped inside, calmly gathering my papers. When the sirens echoed down the road, I was more than ready. 2 officers approached, hands near their belts but not on their weapons. Patricia rushed toward them like she'd been waiting all her life for this moment. "Officers, thank goodness. He's threatening, he's trespassing, he's—" The lead officer, a composed woman with a steady gaze, said, "Sir, keep your hands where we can see them." I complied without hesitation. "I understand. I'm the rightful owner. Here's my deed and my ID." "He's lying," Patricia shouted. "Those are fake. He's running a scam." The officer examined my documents, quiet and methodical. She spoke into her radio, then waited. After a few tense moments, she looked up. "Mr. Hartley, everything appears to be in order. Can you explain the situation?" I did, clearly, calmly, without a trace of anger. Patricia, on the other hand, was unraveling fast. "I've run this HOA for 8 years, she shouted. "He's not even in our records." "Do you have proof that the HOA owns this property?" the officer asked. Patricia clutched her clipboard like a shield. "Not with me, but it's in the HOA files." "The deed predates your organization," Officer Chun replied. "Unless you can show a legal transfer of ownership, Mr. Hartley has every right to be here." Patricia flushed, first purple, then crimson. "Arrest him," she demanded. The second officer spoke up, firm but quiet. "Filing a false report is a criminal offense, ma'am." That was my cue. I pulled out my phone and made a call. "Tom, it's David. Activate the trust clause. Include the fraud investigation." Patricia faltered mid-tirade. What are you doing?" I smiled faintly, tidying up some old paperwork. Moments later, phones started buzzing across the porch. One by one, the board members looked down. Harold read his notification aloud. "Emergency injunction. Cease and desist. Dissolution of charter?" I nodded. "Tom's efficient." Patricia stood frozen. "Who are you?" "I'm a real estate attorney. My grandfather was one of the founders of the Pine Ridge Trust. That trust explicitly prohibits unauthorized jurisdiction claims, like what your HOA has been doing for years." "You're bluffing," she whispered. "I went to the county office this morning," I told her. "Your HOA has been collecting dues illegally. Trust lands make up 60% of your so-called jurisdiction." Her phone rang. She answered, face draining of color. "No, that's not possible. What do you mean the city's investigating criminal charges?" Board members began stepping away from her. $73,000, she mumbled. "That's what they say I owe." Harold looked at her, voice low. "Didn't you use 40 grand from the HOA account to repair your pool?" "That was for gatherings," she stammered. "We never had any gatherings," another board member replied coldly. Just then, a city inspector walked up and took down notes. "Embezzlement, ma'am," he said. "You'll need to come with me." She staggered back, voice breaking. You ruined everything. No, Patricia, I said. You did. I just brought a flashlight. The fallout was swift. By sunset, the HOA signs were torn down, their bylaws tossed into fire pits. Laughter returned to Pine Ridge Lake. Someone even danced as he shredded the laminated list of approved mailbox paint colors. As for Patricia, fraud, embezzlement, and total disgrace followed. Her fancy pool ended up sealing the case against her. Her job? Gone. Her reputation? Reduced to ash. And me? I poured myself a second cup of coffee, settled onto my porch, and watched the sun dip below the trees. Finally at peace on land that was, once again, truly mine.